So, what does it really take to unite a landmass the size of a continent? Today, we're diving into the story of the Mauryan Empire, the very first political force to do exactly that, in India. They literally created a blueprint for power that would echo for centuries to come.
And really, that's the big question we're tackling. How on earth do you take this vast, incredibly diverse land, filled with all these competing kingdoms, and forge it into one single massive empire? Well, the Mauryan story is a masterclass in how it's done. Let's start at the very beginning. You see, before the Mauryas could even dream of building their empire, one kingdom had to rise above all the others. Our story doesn't begin with an empire, but with this fierce, knockdown, drag-out fight for dominance. And out of that chaos, one regional superpower emerged, the Kingdom of Magadha. So, picture this. It's the 6th century BC, and the map of India is basically a patchwork quilt of these Mahajanapadas. You can think of them as these big, powerful, warring states, kind of like the city-states of ancient Greece. And every single one of them had its own ruler, its own army, and its own ambitions. It was just an era of constant conflict. So why Magadha? What was their secret sauce? Well, honestly, its geography was its superpower. Being right in the Ganges Valley meant it had unbelievably fertile land, which could support a huge population and, you guessed it, a huge army. It also had access to rich iron ore, absolutely crucial for making better weapons and farming tools. And the rivers. They were basically highways for moving troops and for trade. Now, this rise to power wasn't an accident. It was pushed forward by some seriously ambitious kings. Bimbisara got the ball rolling, but it was his son, Ajatashatru, who just kicked it into high gear with this relentless, aggressive policy of expansion. These early kings of Magadha, they laid the bloody groundwork that the Mauryas would later build on to create their continent-spanning empire. Okay, so uniting a subcontinent is one thing, but actually governing it, that's a whole other challenge. So how in the world did they pull it off? Let's take a look at the nuts and bolts of the Mauryan imperial machine when it was at its absolute peak. We actually have this incredible window into this time, all thanks to an outsider, a Greek ambassador named Megasthenes. He visited the Mauryan court and was just completely blown away. He described this sophisticated, highly organized state that totally impressed him. And remember, this is the guy coming from the world of Alexander the Great's successors. And the heart of this whole operation was the grand capital, Pataliputra. According to Megasthenes, this city was built on a truly epic scale. I mean, just try to imagine a massive wooden wall, dotted with 570 towers and 64 gates, all of it protected by a deep moat. This wasn't just a city, it was a powerful statement. So how did they manage all this land? Well, the Mauryan genius was really in its centralized administration. They chopped up the empire into provinces, and, here's the clever part, they put a member of the royal family, a prince, in charge of each one. This made sure that loyalty and control flowed right back to the emperor in Pataliputra. Pretty smart. But it wasn't just about politics. Technology played a huge role, too. The widespread use of burnt bricks, that was a total game changer. In the region's damp climate, it meant you could build permanent structures and cities that would last. And the invention of ring wells, so simple but so brilliant, meant that people didn't have to live right on a river anymore. They could move inland and settle new areas, helping the empire to grow. And now we get to the most famous Mauryan emperor of them all, Ashoka. And with him, a moment that would completely redefine the very idea of what an empire could be. This wasn't just a change of ruler, it was a revolution in imperial thinking. Early on, Ashoka acted like any other emperor, right? He expanded his territory by force. He launched this one huge military campaign to conquer the kingdom of Kalinga. But the result of that war, well, it would change him and the empire forever. 100,000. In his own inscriptions, Ashoka says 100,000 people were killed in that war, with who knows how many more dying later. Whether that number is exact or symbolic, it gives you a sense of the sheer carnage, a scale of destruction that absolutely horrified the man who ordered it. And this is what leads to one of the most remarkable documents in all of ancient history, Ashoka's edicts. He had them carved on rocks and pillars all across his empire, and in them he expresses this deep, profound remorse. He doesn't just talk about soldiers, he talks about the suffering of priests, monks, and just ordinary families. It's an incredibly rare, personal look inside an emperor's conscience. And he turned this feeling into actual policy. Ashoka abandoned what he called Gosha, which means conquest by the war drum, and he replaced it with Dhammagosha, conquest by piety or dharma. From now on, his empire would expand through moral influence, not violence. And let's be clear, this was more than just a personal change of heart. It was also a really clever political strategy for creating a single ideology that could unite an incredibly diverse empire. But, like all great empires, the Mauryan age had to come to an end. After reaching such incredible heights, what could possibly cause this mighty structure to just crumble? Let's investigate the cracks that started to appear in the foundation. Now, the common theory you always hear is that Ashoka's pacifism weakened the army and left the empire vulnerable. But as our source material points out, that's probably too simple. The real reasons? Well, they were much deeper and baked into the system itself. Yeah, the real culprits here were fundamental structural weaknesses. The empire didn't collapse because its army suddenly got soft. It collapsed because its economy and its administration were cracking under the immense strain of holding it all together. So let's break that down. First, economically. Just think about how expensive it was to maintain that huge army and all those officials. It was a massive financial drain. We even see them start to debase their currency, using less precious metal in their coins, which is a classic sign that the state is broke. Then you had an administrative problem. The whole system was so centralized that everyone's loyalty was to the king personally, not to the idea of the state. So the minute a weak king came along, the whole structure would start to wobble. And of course, when you're rotting from the inside, it makes you a target on the outside. A weakened, financially strapped government just couldn't defend its huge borders effectively, and that opened the door for new groups, like the Bactrian Greeks, to start pushing in and chipping away at the empire, until eventually it all fell apart. So what's the big takeaway here? Well, the Mauryan legacy is just immense. They were the ones who proved that unifying India was even possible. Their administrative system became the model for future empires. They helped spread key technologies across the subcontinent. And, through Ashoka, they introduced this truly radical idea that an empire could be ruled not just by force, but by conscience. In the end, the Mauryan story is both a blueprint and a warning. It shows us how to build an empire, but it also shows us just how fragile even the most powerful structures can be. It leaves us with a question that echoes through history. What is the true foundation of power? Is it military might? Is it economic strength? Or is it moral authority? And can any single one of them truly last forever?